plasma fire stitched the void ahead of Lieutenant Mara Keen, dazzling threads of violet that pulsed across her canopy like angry veins. She rolled her Aspie-class interceptor on its yaw axis, compressing her lungs against the gravity slip as she skimmed the edge of a missile volley. Enemy tracer rounds raked past, spattering molten flecks along her starboard wing. Red telltales blazed across the heads-up display, and the Aspie shrieked in her cochlear implant. "Port maneuvering thruster offline," the craft's native AI announced in its bland tenor. "Yeah, I noticed," Mara muttered, slamming her throttle forward. The G-couch flexed, exoskeletal restraints tightening across her suit. She pictured the battlefield as a churning three-dimensional rink of glass shards. The broken orbit of Talia's Forg glittered with debris, missile contrails, and the dying halos of fighter drives. 30 kilometers off her bow, Captain Dima Arendt's icon blinked amber. His Aspie's Calliope was taking concentrated fire from a pair of Coalition Claw's sleek, mantis-shaped craft with liquid armor, refusing to solidify in any recognizable pattern. Mara's gloved thumb flipped up a safety guard. "Raven 3, she barked. "Fox 3 on your high band." She loosed a brace of Spearhead's hyperkinetic shards that spat from her launch bay in luminous arc. One claw shuddered under the strike, its prismatic carapace bursting in liquid crystal. The other claw split formation and bored in. Calliope dove, venting coolant and smoke, while Dima's frantic curses rattled over comm. Mara lined up to intercept. Before she could squeeze the trigger, her threat board flared scarlet. 2 hunter-seekers had locked on to her thermal exhaust. They surged from below like silver salmon, arrowing up the gravity well. Her battered port thruster coughed. No time to outturn them. "Ejection recommended," her AI advised. Agreeing, Mara subvocalized a single command. "Simcar, detach." Needles slid from the back of her flight couch. Intravenous leads popped free. A blister of biomechanical flesh dilated above her collarbone, opening like a flower, and the cockpit's inner shell cracked apart. The Aspis' control spines shrank from her neural ports, leaving a brief, exquisite burn. Mara's lungs flattened as her seat shunted forward into the core cradle. Gel polymer closed around her torso, sealing her boots and gauntlets. She inhaled one last breath of cockpit air that tasted of scorched insulation and coffee, and then she was encased, coffin-tight, in the symbiote. The husk, the living core, looked from the outside like a 2-meter teardrop plated in chitin and luminous whiskers. Inside, Mara floated in buoyant vitreous fluid that dulled every sound to a heartbeat hum. She was no longer a pilot in a fighter. She was a pilot fused to a fist-sized organism that could navigate vacuum and hack into friendlies. Her ruined interceptor became bait. The hunter-seekers burrowed through its fuselage, and the Aspies blew in a bright, silent nova. Mara never saw it. The symbiote had already pulsed thrusters, streaking away on a ballistic vector and leaking shimmering ink to mask its signature. Every pilot in Ravenwing had a code name for their biocyber partner. Mara called hers Cricket, because its primary interface icon flickered in her mind like a green insect. 2 luminous aerials and an eager chirp. Cricket's voice was an androgynous whisper inside her skull. "Require nearest allied craft? Accept/decline. Accept." Cricket mapped the battle space in overlay. A living star chart conjured directly onto her optic nerves. Friendly transponders glimmered, but one burned brightest. Dima's Calliope, limping with only half its maneuvering jets. The claw still paced him, waiting to finish the kill. Mara felt Cricket's tendrils unspool a bouquet of nerve fiber and quantum keys. Together, symbiote and pilot searched for a path. Range 9 kilometers. Time to intercept 12 seconds if they slung around a spinning gas canister left from a broken weapons pod. "Do it," she told Cricket. The symbiote's micro-thrusters fired in micro-bursts. Inertia tugged gently at her limbs, yet she hardly perceived motion. There was only that humming darkness, the drifting sparks of battle, and the steady countdown. 7 seconds. Dima's voice crackled. Raven 6, where are you? I'm out of options. 6 seconds. Cricket pinged Calliope's hull, asking permission to dock. The fighter's AI recognized Mara's ID and opened a maintenance port under the dorsal spine and iris of metal petals. 5. A flash. Calliope's ventral plating split under a coilgun slug. Dima screamed in wordless pain. Hull integrity dropped to 20%. 4. Mara's fists clenched involuntarily. She could feel her heart pounding against Cricket's fluid skin. 3. The claw reoriented for the kill shot. 2. Cricket brushed the docking aperture. Chitin fingers burrowed, soldering themselves to the fighter's biogel circuitry. Neural fireworks ignited as thousands of nanoleads threaded into the Espice's command lattice. 1. Mara's awareness exploded outward. Suddenly, she was Calliope's squared hull, stuttering engines, the tang of ozone wafting through ruptured life support ducts. She could taste hydraulic fluid the way a human tastes blood on the tongue. She also felt Dima, slumped forward in the pilot couch, his vitals dipping into yellow. "Override," she ordered. The fighter responded instantly, sidestepping in a vicious corkscrew that threw the enemy claw off its mark. Mara fired the spinal rail just as she crossed its bow. The kinetic lance cored the mantis craft nose to tail. Shards whirled away like glass swans. Silence fell across her private channel. Then Dima coughed. "Mara? What the hell? Stay with me," she said, quick, gentle. She could sense his pain, a ragged disturbance in the fighter's endocrine sensors. Cricket's biotech had already issued a tailored analgesic through the seat ports. "Poomp," Dima wheezed. "Guess you never did like knocking first." Behind them, the sky was still burning. Coalition frigates prowled the outer perimeter, launching fresh fighter swarms. Raven Wing, once 12 strong, was down to 5 operational units. Mara scanned the fleet-wide chatter. Admiral Saavedra was broadcasting a retreat vector, but the ring of enemy destroyers was closing. "We need to punch a hole," she murmured. Cricket flared agreement. Mara addressed the survivors. "Ravenwing, this is Mara Keen and Calliope. Form on me. We're going through that gap at Sector Gamma 8. "Copy," came 2 voices. The third was static. The fourth was a scream that cut short. Cricket fed Mara a new telemetry stream. The Coalition mothership's shield nodes pulsed in a 12-second rotation, briefly exposing a throat of naked armor. If they could overwhelm the point defense just once, the Terran cruiser Aegis behind them could push through and extract, she calculated ordnance. Calliope had half a magazine. Raven 9 had plasma torps, but no launch clearance among the debris. Raven 12's weapons suite was untouched, but its pilot was green and panicking. "Dima," she called. He coughed again. "Present. Can you stay conscious?" Long enough. She hesitated, then made the choice that belied every safety protocol the Symbiote Corps had ever drafted. "I'm going to swap again." Dima's laugh was more a wet rattle. "You only call me when you need a ride." "Raven 9, Mara said over the net. "Prepare for SimCorps ingress." A stunned pause. Then, Lieutenant, I've never." "You'll do fine. Power down your policey overrides and pop the chick door." She jettisoned the tether Cricket had woven through Calliope's brain, careful not to sever vital support lines to Dima. The symbiote would remain docked to administer hemostatics and keep him alive until medevac. Mira's cognition retreated from the fighter in a dizzying snap. She became once more a kernel of flesh encased in biosteel, drifting free. Ahead, Raven 9's Aspie the Changi shimmered with drive plasma. Its pilot, Ensign Ferris Guerrero, had already opened his aft service bay. He sounded terrified. "Ferris," she said, private channel, "steady breaths. Your craft will interpret my command codes, but I need you to yield the control spines." "I'm still in the cockpit," he stammered. "Good. Stay put. I'm not displacing you, just supplementing. Think of me as another set of hands." "Hands, right." A shaky exhale. "Okay, Lieutenant." Semblink green. Cricket darted them forward. Mara merged with Changa's systems. The ship's tendons and servos felt unfamiliar. Lighter struts, fresh lubricant, no carbon scarring. Through the canopy, she saw Faraz glancing around as though ghosts had walked in. "Let's go to work," she said. She took auxiliary fire control while he retained navigation. Together, they dove for the shield gap. Raven 12 followed close, her novice pilot rattling off prayers in Mandarin. Coalition gunners woke like wasps. Lances of cerulean light cut across Mara's bow. She corkscrewed Chang'e, trusting Ferris's instincts for collision vectors while she plotted a torpedo cascade. The timing had to be flawless. Hit the shield generator just as its cycle dipped, then push every ounce of thrust toward the gash. 3 seconds, she told Faraz. Point defense rounds hammered the canopy. Acoustic dampers whined. Chang'e's starboard wing lost a meter of composite. 2. Raven 12 took a direct hit. Her port engine blossomed into fireworks, but the fighter kept speed. The other pilot's voice rose in a thin wail. Mara overrode her channel. "Hold formation! 1!" The shield node flickered. Mara fired. 6 plasma torpedoes screamed forward, each sheathed in its own electromagnetic bubble. They struck the bare hull precisely on the beat, venting superheated metal into space. The remaining shield arrays buckled, faltered, and collapsed, leaving a ragged hole as wide as a destroyer's hangar. "Go!" Mara and Faraz shouted in unison. Through the breach surged Aegis, its prow cannons already cycling. The Terran cruiser's broadside slammed the mothership point blank. Armor plates peeled away like fruit skin. Secondary explosions rippled across the vessel's spine. Raven Wing dove through after their capital ship, hugging the cruiser's deflector envelope. For a heartbeat, exhilaration filled Mara's chest. Then her sensor ghosts multiplied. Coalition reserves, 2 whole wings, swept in from the dark side of the Elias, engines bright as sunrise. Cricket anticipated her reaction. "Symbiotes of viability, 80%. Recommend subspatial leap to next friendly airframe." Mara winced. Each leap shredded a fraction of her nervous lattice, tiny traumas that would blossom into tremors and hallucinations if she lived long enough to retire. But staying put meant dying in a pristine cockpit she'd never flown before. Identify damaged friendlies. Grid icons danced. The nearest was a bomber, the Saint Just, its pilot unconscious after a cockpit decompression. The bomber's payload 8 antimatter breachers remained armed. She considered the absurdity. The bomber was slug-slow, a sitting duck in a knife fight. But if someone could deliver those breachers into the heart of the enemy formation, the campaign over Thalius might end tonight. Farley must have seen the same data. "Lieutenant, no offense, but don't you dare leave me alone with this many hostiles." "I taught you well," Mara said. "You'll manage." She hammered a string of manual commands that Faraz had spent weeks learning in simulators. "Copy them down," she ordered. "Run these in sequence if your left MFD goes black. Maintain Aegis's flak umbrella, and don't chase kills." "But, Raven 9, that's an order," she jettisoned again, floating. Fluid hush, heartbeat echo. Each time felt colder. Cricket warmed her with a flush of metabolic accelerants, but her fingertips still tingled with creeping static. The St. Just's dorsal hatch gaped like a wound. Cricket threaded them inside. She merged. The bomber's cockpit was a cathedral, vaulted ceilings, triple redundant consoles, and the ghostly absence of its pilot. Frost rhymed the consoles where atmosphere had bled away, her own breath fogged. Cricket sealed the breaches with quick foam. Life support rose to marginal. Mara slumped into the dead pilot's couch, control spine slithering into new ports on her neck. Numbness diffused through her shoulders. The Symbo bird fought to keep her blood pressure stable. Coalition wings descended, arrayed in lethal bloom patterns. Mara armed the breachers. The bomber lumbered forward, drives groaning under full thrust. She set a collision course straight for the enemy carrier at the back of the pack. Fleet Command protested. Admiral Saavedra herself. "Cut in. Unknown St. Just operator. Identify." "This is Lieutenant Mara Keen, ma'am. I recommend you clear a path and prep your FTL because it's about to get bright." "Keen, that ship is a strategic asset. Not if we're all ash." She muted the channel before the Admiral finished swearing. "Range to target, 20,000 meters. Point defense began tracking, peppering the bomber with staccato bursts. Armor held for the first volley. The second chewed holes the size of grav sleds. Cricket's voice. Core integrity at 53%. Neural latency increasing. Noted. Mara fused her will to the bomber's mass, guiding it like a battering ram. She felt the antimatter cells humming beneath the decks, each one yearning to flip reality inside out. 5,000 meters. Enemy fighters swarmed, spitting fire. On her periphery, she saw distant sparks. Raven 9 in a running duel. Calliope still venting coolant but alive. Dima stabilizing. The war became a kaleidoscope of micro-tragedies. A coil gun round punched through the bomber's nose, shredding instrumentation. Blood spattered, but Mora couldn't tell if it was her own. Pain felt theoretical, far away. 2,000 meters. Coalition carrier tried evasive lateral thrust, engines flaring turquoise. Too slow. 1,000. She should have bailed. She should have told Cricket to leap again, find another husk, but the math didn't work. No friendlies within viable range now, and every enemy gun zeroed on this single dying bomb. Cricket offered her the option anyway, the symbionte's instinct to preserve the core at all costs. She shook her head fractionally. "Ride it with me," she whispered. Cricket's agreement felt like a gentle sigh. 500 meters. Mara keyed the breachers, safeties off. Her thoughts drifted to childhood. Paper starships hung over her bunk. How she'd believed pilots were immortal angels. The bomber's prow kissed the carrier's arm. A white event blossomed so fiercely that Aegis's sensors would record it as a second sun. Breeders flash-converted hull plating into particulate plasma. Antimatter touching matter in perfect, furious union. The blast radius vaporized the carrier, half its escort, and St. Just itself. But not the Sympor. In the Holocaust, microseconds before detonation, Cricket had acted. Reverse entanglement, a failsafe built for the unthinkable. The symbiote shed Mira's physical body and encoded her neural pattern as quantum frost along its outer shell. It folded space the width of a soap bubble, flinging itself into the relativistic eddies behind the explosion. When awareness returned, it had no anchor. She was consciousness alone, drifting through a void of static. Cricket's presence hovered beside her like a bioluminescent tide pool. "Mara?" "Identify/confirm." She tried to speak, realized she lacked lungs. Her identity flagged. A hazy loop pilot. Terran. Lieutenant, yes. She answered with mind thought. A ripple in shared code. "Confirm. Where are we?" "Location uncertain. Mass sensors report containment breach. Core is non-corporeal. This unit riding residual blast wave. Translation. They were ghosts riding light." External feed popped open. She saw the battlefield as radio ghosts. Shockwaves carving spirals through wreckage. Enemy formations dissolving. Aegis accelerating toward FTL translation. Raven 9 still alive. Calliope adrift but recovered by a dropship. Mara's pattern shivered. "Can we reintegrate?" Cricket hesitated, as much as an AI organism could. Biological matrix degraded. Suitable host required. Time window narrow before decoherence. The symbiote had saved her mind, but her body was atoms. To survive, they needed a new shell. Another pilotless craft or a blank clone tank. The fleet carried a few empties for just such emergencies, though none nearby. Cricket scanned, latched onto a ping, the hospital corvette Mercy, 2 light seconds away, launching pods to sweep survivors. It carried spare husks, growth shells, waiting for wounded pilots. "Risk, 90% that interceptor fire intercepts path. Accept?" Mara glimpsed. The alternative, dispersing into quantum foam. A legend told around mess hall tables. She wasn't ready to be a ghost story. "Accept," she said. Cricket burned every remaining jewel, launching them in a needle arc through strobing ruin. The trip would take minutes. Decoherence threatened in seconds. So Cricket did one last forbidden thing. It braided its own code around hers. a mesh of symbiont and human, sacrificing isolated identity for entangled resilience. Pain had no meaning here, but she felt the melding as a dawn of simultaneous memories, Cricket's birth in a wet lab, its first taste of stellar wind, every cockpit it had ever occupied. In return, she gifted her childhood starships, her fear, her stubborn hope. The Mercy's dorsal bay yawned open. A biopod snared them in magnetic tendrils, reeling them into warmth, gravity, and the smell of antiseptic. Darkness. Light. Mara opened eyes hers, and saw a medbay ceiling. Her limbs felt wrong, too pliant, newborn. She lay in a vat of nutritive gel, tubes laced through fresh skin. A medic noticed her blinking, and shouted for the surgeon. She tried to speak. A chorus answered from within. Not just Cricket, but the hybrid of both, fused where separation might never again be clean. "Welcome back, Lieutenant," Cricket whispered through her nervous system. Mara breathed, the first breath of a borrowed life. Beyond the bay's armored window, Thalia's 4 glowed with dawn. Coalition forces were in retreat. Terran victory chatter filled the comms. She flexed a new hand, translucent under thin light. Even in triumph, she felt the cost, etched into marrow that wasn't hers, psyche braided with alien sinews. She wondered what command would do with a pilot who was also a symbiote. But for now, existence itself was miracle enough. She closed her eyes and listened to 2 heartbeats, one human, one other beating, in synchronous cadence, and she knew, with bone-deep certainty, that the next time the void called, they would answer together, inseparable, a living core born of war and stubborn love for the endless sky.